Before I tell you what happened on New Year's Eve, I need you to understand this. If you had visited our house during most of December, you would have said everything was normal. That's the part people never believe. My name is Ethan Cole. I was 27 years old in December of 2014, temporarily living with my parents and my younger sister in a remote area outside Christmas Valley, Oregon, a place so quiet that you can hear weather coming hours before it arrives. There were 4 of us in the house: my father, Richard, my mother, Elaine, my sister, Mara, and me. No history of mental illness, no substance abuse, no extreme beliefs. We were the kind of family nothing happens to. The first change was so small I didn't even notice it at the time. Around December 4th, my mother started waking up earlier than usual. Not abruptly, just earlier. She'd be up before dawn, making coffee, sitting quietly at the kitchen table. When I asked her why she was awake so early, she said, "I like the quiet before everyone starts moving." That made sense. The house was quiet. A few days later, she began cleaning more than usual. Not obsessively, just thoroughly. She wiped door handles every night. She vacuumed the hallway twice a day. She said dust was getting worse this winter. We believed her. In rural Oregon, dust gets everywhere. On December 8th, I noticed my mother standing in the hallway late at night. She wasn't doing anything, just standing there. When I asked her if she was okay, she smiled and said, "I thought I heard something settle." Old houses make noise. I went back to bed. By the second week of December, my mother stopped using the guest room. She said it smelled stale. Then she stopped letting Mara use the hallway bathroom. She said the mirror felt off. Not haunted, not evil, just off. That word came up a lot. Around December 13th, my mother began pausing mid-conversation. She'd tilt her head slightly, like she was focusing on a distant sound. When asked what she was listening for, she said, "Pressure changes. Houses do that before storms." But there were no storms. The first moment that truly unsettled me happened on December 15th. I woke up around 2:30 a.m. to a low murmuring sound. Not loud, not clear, human. I followed it to the laundry room. The lights were off. My mother was standing there, whispering toward the washing machine while it ran empty. When I asked what she was doing, she didn't jump or panic. She calmly said, "It carries sound better when it's moving." I laughed nervously. She didn't. The next morning, my father suggested stress. My mother worked hospice care. Death was normal for her. We agreed. We needed it to be stress. By December 18th, my mother's choice of words shifted. She stopped saying the house and started saying here. Not this house, just here. She also started asking strange questions. Do you ever feel like time slows down at night? Do you feel heavier after sunset? They weren't insane questions, just unsettling. Christmas approaches and it felt wrong. Not scary, hollow. My mother insisted we not open presents yet. She said, "Let's wait until after the week passes." She couldn't explain which week. We didn't push. On December 26th, we heard scraping from the hallway bathroom. My mother had locked herself inside for hours. When she came out, her fingertips were bleeding. She had scratched something hard. She said, "It doesn't like being looked at directly." That was the first time anyone said the word "it." 2 days later, my father contacted Father Lucas, a priest from a small parish over an hour away. Not for an exorcism, for advice. Father Lucas came on December 29th. He spoke quietly with my mother. No shouting, no rituals. When he asked her if she wanted help, she replied, "I want you to leave before it finishes passing." Father Lucas looked genuinely afraid. Before leaving, he told my father, "If she asks you to leave the house, do it immediately." On December 31st, the house was peaceful, too peaceful. My mother cooked breakfast. She hummed. She hugged us all individually, longer than usual. At 9:40 p.m., she asked us to sit in the living room. She said, "You need to leave before midnight." My father refused. He said she was exhausted. She began crying, quietly. She said, "If you stay, I won't be able to stop it." Father Lucas arrived at 11:26 p.m. I remember the exact time because my sister checked her phone and mouthed it to me, like the number itself mattered. He didn't rush inside. He stood on the porch for a full minute, listening to the house, his hand still on the doorframe. When he finally stepped in, he didn't bless the doorway or say anything dramatic. He just exhaled slowly and said, "It's very crowded in here." That sentence made my stomach drop. Not evil, not dark, crowded. We gathered in the living room. My mother sat on the couch, hands folded in her lap, posture perfect, like she was attending a formal meeting. She looked calm, alert, almost relieved. Father Lucas asked her simple questions, her name, the date, where she was. She answered all of them correctly. Then he asked, "Do you know what time it is?" She paused, not confused, thoughtful. She said, "It's almost time for it to stop pretending." No one reacted. That was the strange part. It felt rude to interrupt her. Father Lucas began praying quietly, not loudly enough to dominate the room, almost conversational. Nothing happened. No reactions, no resistance. My mother nodded occasionally, as if she agreed with parts of it. At one point, she corrected him. He said something about peace. She gently said, "That's not what it wants. It wants balance." Father Lucas stopped praying. That silence lasted a long time. Around 11:50-something, I noticed something subtle. My mother stopped looking at Father Lucas. She started looking at us. Not scanning, focusing, one by one. When her eyes landed on me, I felt an overwhelming urge to explain myself, to apologize for something I couldn't identify. She smiled slightly and said, "You feel it too, don't you?" I shook my head. She didn't push. She just looked disappointed. The house didn't get cold. That's important. Instead, the air felt thick, like when a storm is about to break, but stretched too long. My ears popped. My sister whispered that she felt pressure behind her eyes. Father Lucas began sweating, not panicked, just steady, heavy sweat soaking through his collar. He whispered to my father, "She's not the point of focus." That didn't make sense then. It does now. At 11:12 p.m., my mother spoke again, softly, clearly. She said, "You really should leave now." My father stood up, not angry, not dismissive, just tired. He said, "Elaine, we're not leaving you." She looked genuinely frightened for the first time. She said, "That's not what I meant." Father Lucas raised his voice slightly, not shouting, commanding. He told whatever was present that it did not belong there. My mother flinched, not like she was hurt, like someone had just spoken out of turn. She covered her ears and whispered, "Please don't provoke it." That's when my father stepped forward. He reached for her shoulder. I think he was trying to ground her, trying to remind her who she was. The moment his hand touched her, my mother screamed. Not a roar, a raw human scream of terror. She shoved him away, hard, instinctive, panicked. He stumbled backward.
There was a single awful sound, dull and final, as his head struck the corner of the fireplace. Then silence. Not dramatic silence, the kind where your brain refuses to accept what just happened. My mother froze. She stared at my father on the floor, her face collapsed. She crawled to him, shaking, repeating, "I told you to go. I told you." Father Lucas knelt beside my father. He didn't pray. He checked for a pulse. Then he closed his eyes. That was when my sister started screaming. The ambulance took too long. We lived too far out. Fireworks began in the distance around 11:58 p.m. Bright flashes through the windows, celebration sounds cutting through grief.
My mother rocked on the floor, whispering that it was leaving and we just needed to let it finish. At midnight, she looked up and said it was quiet now. My father was pronounced dead shortly after. Blunt force trauma, an accident. My mother was hospitalized and diagnosed with an acute psychotic episode brought on by stress. That explanation satisfied everyone except us. Weeks later, when we returned to the house, Father Lucas came one last time. He didn't pray. He walked into the hallway and stopped at the mirror. He pointed to faint scratches etched into the glass and said they didn't come from inside her. Then he left. Every New Year's Eve, my mother calls me. Her voice is calm now, normal. She always asks if it feels lighter where I am. I always lie, because sometimes, just before midnight, it feels like something finishes moving.
My name is Daniel Moore. I'm telling this now because enough time has passed that no one contacts me anymore asking questions. The case was labeled unsolved, and most people involved are gone, either dead or missing. This happened on December 31st, 2017, in a place most people wouldn't even know how to point to on a map. A small town near a service road outside Tonopah, Nevada. None of us were locals. That's important. We were working short-term contracts, warehouse, transport, maintenance jobs, the kind where people come and go without anyone really knowing them. One of the guys, Chris, had access to a rented house just outside town. Not a vacation rental, just a half-furnished place used by rotating workers. No neighbors close enough to hear anything clearly. No security cameras. Spotty cell service. It sounded perfect for a quiet New Year's Eve. There were 8 of us. Co-workers, girlfriends, friends of friends, and one guy named Andrew. Andrew didn't stand out at first. Early 30s, average build, soft-spoken, always on time for work, never drank much. The kind of guy you wouldn't notice until he stopped showing up. He barely touched his soda all night. He sat near the window, checking the road every so often like he was expecting headlights. We arrived around 6:45 p.m. The house sat off a dirt road a few minutes from the highway. No streetlights, just the hum of passing trucks in the distance. Inside, it felt normal. Music playing, boxes of food, someone turned on the TV for background noise. Andrew sat apart from everyone. At one point, I asked him if he was okay. He said, "I just don't like nights where people expect things to change." I didn't understand what he meant. I didn't ask. Around 9:40 p.m., Andrew asked a strange question. He said, "How far is the nearest police station from here?" Someone laughed and said, "Relax, man, it's New Year's." Andrew nodded, but he kept checking the time after that, every few minutes. At 10:50 p.m., that's when everything broke. Andrew walked into the kitchen. A few seconds later, he came back holding a knife. At first, I thought he was joking. Then he stabbed Chris in the chest. Once. Chris didn't scream. He looked down,
confused, like his body hadn't caught up with what happened. Then he collapsed. People froze. Someone screamed. Someone knocked over a chair. Andrew stepped backward, breathing hard. He whispered, "I tried to keep it contained." That sentence didn't make sense at the time. Then the doorbell rang. The sound of the doorbell felt unreal, cheerful, normal. Andrew looked toward the door and said they weren't supposed to come this early. People shouted at him not to open it. He did anyway. 3 men walked in. They didn't look surprised. One of them looked past Andrew at Chris on the floor and said, "So it's already loud." That's when my stomach dropped. These weren't friends. They weren't invited. They were people who had been driving around, looking for houses with noise, lights, parties, places where everyone would be distracted. Later, police said similar robberies had happened that night, mostly unreported, because no one wanted to admit what kind of party they were having. One man locked the door behind them. Another pulled out zip ties. They demanded phones, wallets, anything valuable. Someone resisted. He was stabbed, not by Andrew. That's when it stopped being about Andrew. He lost control instantly. Andrew backed away, shaking, repeating, "This isn't what I meant." One of the men shoved him and said, "You opened the door, sit down." Andrew sat. The TV started the New Year's broadcast at 11:59 p.m. The countdown echoed through the house, people cheering on the screen, while screaming happened off-camera in the same rooms. Someone tried to escape through a side door. They didn't make it. I won't describe everything, not because I don't remember, but because some things don't need to be repeated. I hid in a small storage room near the back. No lock, just darkness. I pressed myself against shelves and stayed completely still. I counted footsteps. I listened to voices argue. At some point, sirens echoed faintly from the highway. That changed everything. The men panicked. They ran. Andrew ran with them. Police arrived around 12:40 a.m. The house looked like it had been torn apart from the inside. 5 people were dead. 2 survived with life-altering injuries. Andrew was gone. So were the others. Andrew's phone was found on the kitchen counter. One unsent message, time-stamped 10:48 p.m. Noise will draw them. Door unlocked. Andrew was never found. People want clean explanations, a killer, a robbery, a reason. But what happened wasn't clean. It was one unstable person, plus people willing to exploit chaos, plus a house no one would think to check. And that's why it still scares me, because nothing about that night felt planned. It felt like something slipping, and no one realizing how bad it was until it was far too late.
My name is Lucas Hale, and in December of 2019, I was working overnight as a county emergency dispatcher in a rural part of eastern Montana, not far from the Wyoming border. It's the kind of place where distances matter, where help can be 40 minutes away on a good night, and where silence is something you learn to respect. New Year's Eve was usually quiet. Most people stayed home, and those who didn't were easy to track. That night started no differently. The first call came in just after 9 p.m., an older woman living alone in a manufactured home outside a small town called Redfield Crossing. She sounded calm, almost apologetic. She said someone had been walking around her property for the last 20 minutes, not running, not trying to break in, just slow movement outside her windows. Every time she turned on a light, whoever it was stopped moving.
I took her information, logged it as suspicious activity, and told her I'd notify a deputy when one was available. She thanked me and hung up. Nothing about it stood out at the time. About half an hour later, another call came in. Different resident, same dirt road. A man this time. He said someone had knocked on his door, very lightly, not enough to sound aggressive, just enough to be heard. When he called out, the knocking stopped. When he turned on the porch light, there was no one there. By 10 p.m., 3 more calls had come in from that same stretch of road, all similar. Someone outside, someone just out of sight, knocking that stopped the moment it was acknowledged. No forced entry, no yelling, no threats, just presence. I remember thinking it felt coordinated, but I didn't say that out loud. A deputy finally radioed in around 10:20, saying he was heading toward Redfield Crossing. At 10:38, his radio crackled with static, then went dead. No emergency signal, no follow-up. We tried to raise him repeatedly and got nothing. At 11:02 p.m., I got a call I still hear in my head sometimes. A young woman, early 20s maybe. She gave her address immediately, like she'd rehearsed it. She said there were people outside her trailer, more than one. I asked what they were doing. She said they were standing just beyond the porch light, talking quietly to each other. I asked what they wanted. She said they were asking questions through the door. Who else lived there? Whether she was expecting anyone, if she planned to leave soon. Her voice stayed level, but she was whispering now. She told me they already knew her name, even though she hadn't said it out loud. I told her not to open the door under any circumstances. I told her deputies were on the way. That part wasn't true anymore, but I needed her to believe it. While we were talking, I heard a sound on her end of the line, not knocking, something lighter, a dragging noise, like fingertips brushing across metal siding. She stopped mid-sentence and whispered that they were walking along the outside of her home, slowly, counting steps between windows. She said it didn't sound like hiding anymore. At 11:27, everything went quiet on her end. I asked if she was still there. After a few seconds, she came back on the line and said the people outside had stopped moving. I asked why that worried her. She said, because they stopped pretending. The line disconnected. After that, no more calls came in from Redfield Crossing, not a single one. Midnight passed with fireworks going off in town while an entire road went silent. Backup finally reached the area after 12:15 a.m. What they found was never shared publicly, but I heard it as it came in over the radio. Several homes with doors standing open, no signs of forced entry, personal belongings untouched, food still warm, vehicles still parked outside. 4 residents were missing. One body was later found, several hundred yards into open land. No visible injuries. Cause of death listed as exposure. No explanation for why they'd left their home on foot in freezing temperatures. Weeks later, during a routine review, I listened back to the recordings from that night. On the young woman's call, right before the line cut out, there was something none of us had noticed before. A second voice, close to the phone, calm, almost curious. It said, "This one talks too much." I quit dispatch less than 2 months later. Every New Year's Eve since then, I turn my phone off before midnight. Because sometimes the last call isn't asking for help. Sometimes it's just proof that someone was listening when it happened.